All right, we did veterans and PTSD. To start, what is PTSD? The definition of PTSD is a psychological reaction occurring after experiencing a highly stressful event, such as wartime combat, physical violence, or natural disaster. That is usually characterized by depression, anxiety, flashbacks, reoccurring nightmares, and avoidance of reminders of the event.
Some PTSD symptoms seen in veterans can be anger, faster sudden reactions, feeling on edge, anxiety/panic attacks, nightmares/trouble sleeping, and flashbacks/intrusive thoughts.
Issues that involve PTSD. It is said that between the years 2017 and 2020, there were an average of 80% of veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a problem itself, but another problem is that many veterans are not getting the help they need to deal with it. This can stem from many other issues, such as self-motivation to get help that is needed, lack of resources, lack of knowledge about resources, denial, system failure, etc.
Stigmas and issues. There's a stigma in both the military and with males that help makes you weak. Not only are symptoms the problems, but it is the fact that many veterans cannot even receive the proper care. There's a lack of agencies that provide care for veterans. Even when they do want help, it is a long process to receive the proper funds, or for some reason they do not qualify for funds. This deters many from getting the help they truly need. Some veterans just do not have the support system they need to take that step. Many come home and do not have family or have a lot on their plate. When it comes to settling down, struggling with mental health alone can make receiving help feel like a lot. If getting help feels like too much, then some people may want to see what literature is available to learn themselves.
Types of help. Cognitive behavioral therapy is when a client can start off imagining the situation that is troubling them and then take steps towards situations that can also provoke these feelings. Cognitive processing therapy is a therapy where the client has a specific number of sessions. Cognitive therapy is very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy. They are both very involved, and prolonged exposure is when the patient slowly approaches the problem.
Importance of VFWs. The VFW was founded in 1899. Most cities have a VFW. When it comes to a very low or mild case of PTSD, I've heard of VFWs helping veterans overcome the little bit of PTSD they may have. This is a form of therapy where other veterans are able to connect with other veterans who may share the same experiences or thoughts with each other. Sometimes having the understanding that you are not alone and being able to talk to someone who understands what you are going through, it makes it easier to overcome the mild struggles of PTSD.
Controversies in PTSD. PTSD controversies were very common all the way back to 1951. Fortunately, controversies about it are not too common in today's time. For quite some time, when combat veterans returned home with PTSD, it was not fully acknowledged. Many were unaware that these symptoms of PTSD were a normal reaction to combat. This created a gap in understanding what was going on with these soldiers. It caused many arguments on what was true and what was not true. In the first DSM-1, PTSD was labeled as only happening in people that had pre-existing mental conditions. So not only were soldiers not qualifying, but they were being pushed away. This was not happening that long ago in the year 1951. In the second edition of DSM, in 1968, PTSD was still not considered a disorder. This leads to DSM-3. PTSD was put down as diagnosable mental disorder in 1980 and made sure to include that it was by a traumatic event. This is a huge step as it then considers combat part of it. These fixes continued to DSM-3R DSM-4 in 1994. This continued on to the DSM-5, the information providing by Eckerling, Field, and Stewart on DSMs helps understanding that having a lack of information on something causes the argument and controversy. It was also stated by these authors that even today there are controversies.
Today's controversies. Even today, there are controversies in this practice. Some of these controversies are that veterans are underdiagnosed, not taken seriously, and how much they're actually receiving when it comes to funding.
Working with clients who have PTSD. When it comes to working with people who have PTSD, you have to factor in many things when assessing them. The client would need to be assessed on how they are adjusting. The client can be asked very basic questions that do not pry too much. Some questions might be, how have you been feeling lately? What brings you in here today? These are two very simple questions that give the patient a broad area to give me the response that they choose. The client can also be asked to fill out an intake form so that even more basic information is provided. This intake form can also help me understand what questions to ask and give me a better understanding of the controversies we will have. These answers will also help give me an idea of where the patient is at, such as if they are hurting themselves, abusing any substances, or even wanting to hurt others.
Cultural influences. As many people may know, culture can influence how a person acts and feels. When treating a client, it is good to be aware of their cultural background. Some ways to know are simply asking, researching, or learning as sessions occur. Samha's Principles of Care has a quick basic rundown of what can be affected. It states that culture influences how someone interprets and assigns meaning to the trauma and influences how people convey traumatic stress through behavior, such as emotions and thinking. It also affects what qualifies as a legitimate health concern and which symptoms warrant help. Cultures can affect how a patient may feel coming into treatment or how a treatment goes. An example of a cultural belief on mental health could be that their culture does not believe in any type of therapy. When this client comes in, this could mean that they have absolutely no support system. Asian American and Pacific Islanders do not believe in therapy and believe that if you need it, you are crazy. In the past, Japanese culture was for suicide because it was honorable in their eyes, whereas now, suicide is not supported in many cultures today. In the African American community, it is common to attend church. Most seem to believe that mental illness is a weakness and pray instead of speaking out loud to other members. By doing so, they're not doing help seeking that may be beneficial to them. In specific Indian religions, violence is not the answer, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. When getting to know a patient, it is very good to know what cultural background they may have or religious beliefs. You can ask some questions or do your own research so that you have a better understanding of them. Within these areas, support systems may also be affected. Last of all, culture can provide a source of strength, unique coping strategies, and specific resources. The last input that culture does not always mean it will affect in a negative way, which is very nice. Culture can be really empowering to one's healing process.
Ethical concerns. When treating patients, there will also be ethical concerns. This is where we learn to understand that our opinions cannot be biased, and we must try to see things from both perspectives. An example of this can be a soldier being treated for PTSD. When he was in combat, he shot and killed a young boy that was attacking his man. The ethical part of this is to either be disgusted he killed such a young boy or set aside opinions and remind yourself that he was in a life or death situation and possibly saved lives by doing this. Another ethical concern is your PTSD patient living at home with his mother. They seem to love their mom, who is a great support system. This patient also receives disability checks because they are not well enough to work. Over time, you are able to put together that this patient's mother is using these checks to buy things for herself and not her son. You then have to ask yourself, do you report her and he loses his support system that he is thriving with, or do you ignore it while his mother takes advantage of his disability?